Recently published accounts indicating that Iran was charging up to $2 million per vessel.
Iran is A, fully in charge of how many ships get through, but also B, how much those ships that want to pass have to pay to be guaranteed safe passage.
20% of the world's oil flows through a narrow strip of water just 21 miles wide. Iran now controls it, and they're charging $2 million per ship to pass through. Let me explain what's happening. There's this narrow waterway called the Strait of Hormuz. Think of it as a tiny gate between the Middle East and the rest of the world. Before February, about 140 ships passed through it every day, carrying oil and gas to every corner of the planet. Today, only 4 or 5 ships make it through. The rest are stuck. Nearly 2,000 ships are trapped inside the Persian Gulf right now, with 20,000 sailors waiting on board. So how did we get here? On February 28th, the United States and Israel launched a war against Iran. Iran's response was simple but devastating. They closed the Strait of Hormuz, not partially, not just for enemies. They shut it down completely. By March 4th, Iran's Revolutionary Guard announced they were in full control. If you wanted to pass through, you needed their permission. At first, Iran said the strait was only closed to enemies like the US and Israel. Ships from friendly countries like China, Malaysia, Egypt, South Korea, India, and Pakistan could still pass through if they asked nicely. But in March, Iran didn't just control the strait, they turned it into a business. They created what people now call Tehran's toll booth. The system was simple. Before your ship could pass, you had to tell Iran what cargo you were carrying, where you were going, and who owned the ship. Then you paid a toll, $1 for every barrel of oil on your ship. Most oil tankers carry about 2 million barrels. Do the math, that's $2 million per ship. And Iran only accepted payment in Chinese yuan or cryptocurrency. Once you paid, Iranian military boats would escort your tanker through a narrow route close to Iran's coast. According to reports from Lloyd's List, at least 2 ships paid this fee in March. The whole world watched as Iran basically started charging rent for using international waters. Then, on April 13th, the United States hit back. They set up a naval blockade around Iranian ports. American warships started stopping any ship connected to Iran. The Pentagon said they would chase down Iranian vessels anywhere in the world. Since the blockade started, U.S. forces have turned around 31 Iranian ships. On April 19th, things got violent. The U.S. military fired at an Iranian container ship called Tuska and captured it near the Strait of Hormuz. Iran called it piracy. The U.S. called it enforcement. The next day, American forces stopped 3 more Iranian tankers near India, Malaysia, and Sri Lanka. Now, here's what makes this situation so crazy. Iran controls who can leave the Persian Gulf through the strait. The U.S. controls who can enter the Gulf through the strait. Ships are trapped between 2 rival militaries. You need permission from both sides to move. Good luck with that. Iran's first vice president, Mohammad Reza Arif, said something important on April 19th. He wrote that the security of the Strait of Hormuz is not free. He added, one cannot restrict Iran's oil exports while expecting free security for others. The choice is clear, either a free oil market for all or the risk of significant costs for everyone. The very next day, Iran started attacking foreign ships, not American ships, not Israeli ships, foreign merchant vessels that had nothing to do with the war. 2 Indian-flagged ships got hit. Iran said they were operating without authorization. Then, on April 22, Iran captured 2 more container ships. One was the MSC Francesca, flying a Panama flag, heading to Sri Lanka. The other was the Epaminondas, a Greek-owned ship going to India. Both were fired upon. Both were seized. Ali Vaiz from the International Crisis Group told reporters this wasn't random violence. He said, what we are seeing in the Strait of Hormuz is not strategic mastery, but mutual brinkmanship, with each side testing the limits of coercion. The danger is that neither believes it can afford to blink, and that makes every incident at sea a potential trigger for wider escalation. Despite all this chaos, Iran is making more money than before the war. In March and April, Iran exported about 1.7 to 1.8 million barrels of oil per day. That's actually more than their 2025 average. Oil prices shot up from $70 per barrel before the war to over $100 now. Some physical oil cargoes hit $150 per barrel. Here's the shocking part. Before the war, Iran was earning about $115 million per day from oil sales. That's roughly $3.4 billion per month. Now, even with the war and the blockades, Iran earned at least $4.97 billion in the past month. That's 40% more money than before the war started. Iran is literally profiting from this crisis. And about those tolls, Iranian officials now claim they've received the first payments. Hamid Reza Haji-Babai, a deputy speaker in Iran's parliament, told state media that toll money has been deposited into Iran's central bank. The fees vary depending on ship type, size, and cargo. Everything goes into one account. They'll decide how to spend it later.
Now let's talk about why the United States can't do much about this. Geography is Iran's superpower. Iran has almost 1,000 miles of coastline along the Persian Gulf. The northern side isn't flat. There are hills, mountains, valleys, and offshore islands everywhere, perfect for hiding weapons. Iran doesn't need a fancy navy to control the strait. They use cheap drones, sea mines, small fast boats, and even unmanned exploding boats. These are hard to track and even harder to destroy. Nick Childs from the International Institute for Strategic Studies explained that this is a uniquely challenging choke point because there are no alternatives. In the open ocean, ships can change routes. Here, there's nowhere to go. Kevin Rowlands from the Royal United Services Institute said Iran can just sit and wait for targets. He called it a kill zone, where warning time for an attack can be just seconds. Iran doesn't even need to sink ships. Just the threat of attack is enough to keep most vessels away. The U.S. military sent thousands more Marines to the Middle East. The USS Tripoli assault ship and multiple Marine units are heading to the region. These units usually handle evacuations, raids, and amphibious assaults. Everyone's wondering if Trump is planning a ground invasion. His administration says no, but the military buildup tells a different story. Trump's response has been all over the place. First, he suggested the U.S. and Iran could run the strait together as a joint venture and share the toll money. Then he threatened Iran, posting on social media they better not be charging fees, and if they are, they better stop now. A few days later, he bombed Iranian military facilities on Karg Island, which handles 90% of Iran's oil exports, but he didn't touch the actual oil facilities, just the military ones. Is any of this legal? Not according to international law. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea guarantees free passage through international straits. About 170 countries signed this treaty. Iran didn't, the US didn't either, but most legal experts say these rules count as customary international law, meaning everyone should follow them anyway. Arsenio Dominguez, the head of the International Maritime Organization, was very clear. He told reporters, countries do not have the right to introduce tolls or payments or charges on these straits. Any introduction of tolls is something that is against international law. I will call for anyone not to actually follow and use these kind of services, because that's a precedent that would be very detrimental for global shipping. But here's the problem. There's no way to enforce international law. Courts can issue rulings, but they can't force Iran to obey. The shipping industry is terrified. Philip Belcher from Intertanko, which represents half the world's oil tanker fleet, said his organization is still telling members not to use the strait. He called the idea of paying tolls against the whole idea of international laws and free passage through international waterways. He also pointed out something crucial. Iran's Revolutionary Guard, which controls the toll booth system, is listed as a terrorist organization by the US and EU. Belcher said the payment of monies to a terrorist organization should be avoided, but some countries are negotiating anyway. India, Pakistan, China, Malaysia, and others have reportedly talked with Iran about safe passage. They need the oil. They need their ships to move. International law is nice in theory, but it doesn't put fuel in your country's tanks. The economic impact is massive. Fatih Birol, head of the International Energy Agency, called this the worst energy supply crisis in history. Oil that used to flow freely now barely trickles through. The International Monetary Fund says if this continues, it could trigger a global recession. The UK economy would be hit harder than any other G7 nation. And here's what really worries experts. If Iran gets away with this, other countries might try the same thing. Indonesia's finance minister already suggested charging tolls on the Strait of Malacca, which handles 30% of global trade. He quickly backed down after Singapore and Malaysia objected, but the idea is out there now. Meanwhile, peace talks in Pakistan went nowhere. Vice President J.D. Vance met with Iranian officials over the weekend. He presented what he called America's final and best offer. Iran rejected it. The main sticking points are Iran wants the U.S. naval blockade lifted. The U.S. wants Iran to stop pursuing nuclear weapons. Nobody's backing down. Right now, the situation is frozen. Iran controls the exit, America controls the entrance, and 2,000 ships sit in the middle with nowhere to go. Every day that passes, the global economy takes another hit. Every ship that tries to move risks becoming the next target, and every threat from either side brings us closer to a wider war.